Downtown traffic. Isaiah Reed, a 58-year-old homeless man, is counting the last few dollars in his pocket, the money meant for a cheap dinner before the mission shelter closes for the night. If he misses that meal line, he goes hungry. Then something across the street stops him cold. A black SUV pulls up, and a sharply dressed man steps out, still talking on his phone. The man's coat and watch scream wealth, but Isaiah isn't looking at him. He's staring at a weak metal fixture hanging above the sidewalk, swaying like it could fall at any moment. One wrong step, and it could come crashing down. People walk past without noticing. Isaiah rushes forward, grabs the stranger, covers his mouth, and whispers, "Be quiet." What Isaiah doesn't know yet is that the man he just saved is a millionaire. Before we go any further, comment where in the world you are watching from, and make sure to subscribe, because tomorrow's story is one you don't want to miss. Isaiah's worn boots scraped against the concrete as he made his way through the South District's changing landscape. The morning light cast long shadows between the old brick buildings and sleek construction barriers. He paused near a chain-link fence, his weathered hands gripping the metal as he studied the site beyond. A half-demolished warehouse stood like an open wound against the sky. Isaiah's trained eye caught things others might miss. The way the temporary supports leaned at odd angles, how the warning tape fluttered loose in places it should be secure. He pulled out his small notebook, its pages dog-eared and soft from years of use, and made a careful note about the scaffolding brackets. "Gonna need better anchoring there," he muttered, shaking his head. 20 years of maintenance work had taught him that cutting corners always cost more in the end. He'd learned that lesson the hard way, back when he still had a regular paycheck and a home to return to each night. The sound of machinery starting up drew his attention to a crew arriving for the day shift. They barely glanced his way as they unlocked the gate, treating him like part of the urban landscape, as invisible as a fire hydrant or street sign. Isaiah stepped back, clutching his notebook closer. The pages contained his private dreams, detailed sketches of repairs needed around the neighborhood, lists of materials, careful calculations. Some pages held more personal hopes, like fixing the crooked steps on Lena's porch, if she'd ever let him near enough to try. A sleek coffee shop across the street had just opened its doors, letting out the aroma of fresh pastries and expensive roasts. Isaiah's stomach growled, reminding him of the breakfast ticket he'd given to Harold. The old veteran's hands had been shaking this morning, arthritis making it hard to hold his cup. Isaiah couldn't watch that and keep his own meal. He moved along the construction fence, noting loose bolts and hasty welds. The whole site felt wrong somehow, like a puzzle with pieces forced into places they didn't belong. Isaiah had always been good at seeing patterns, understanding how things fit together, or how they could fall apart. A group of business people hurried past, their shoes clicking importantly on the sidewalk. One woman's heel caught in a sidewalk crack, and she stumbled slightly. Isaiah instinctively stepped forward to help, but she quickly righted herself and hurried on without acknowledging him. He was used to that, too. The morning grew warmer as Isaiah continued his walk. He stopped to help Mrs. Martinez prop open the heavy door of her corner store, earning a grateful smile and a day-old apple that he tucked into his jacket pocket. Small kindnesses kept him going, even on the hardest days. Near the community center, he found Malik tinkering with his cart again. The teenager's face lit up when he saw Isaiah approaching. "Mr. Reed, I think I fixed that squeaky wheel like you showed me." Isaiah examined Malik's work, noting the careful way the boy had tightened the bearing. "Good job," he said quietly. "But remember to check the alignment, too. A straight wheel rolls longer." Malik nodded eagerly, absorbing the lesson like he did all of Isaiah's teachings. "You know so much about fixing stuff. Why don't you apply for work at one of these construction sites?" Isaiah's hands stilled on the cart. How could he explain the reality of background checks, required addresses and the way people's eyes changed when they learned you lived in a shelter. Instead, he just said, "Sometimes fixing things takes more than just knowing how." They worked together on the cart for a while, Isaiah showing Malik how to oil the joints properly. The boy reminded him of himself at that age, curious, eager to learn, believing that understanding how things worked could make the world better. As the day wore on, Isaiah's path took him past more signs of the neighborhood's transformation. New luxury apartments rose like glass mountains, while familiar old storefronts disappeared behind "For Lease" signs. He remembered when South District had been full of family businesses, when people knew their neighbors' names and looked out for each other. The construction site buzzed with activity now. Isaiah watched a crane lift steel beams high above the street, swaying slightly in the afternoon breeze. He frowned at the movement, calculating wind speeds and load limits in his head. Another note went into his book, though he knew no one would ever read it. The traffic grew heavier as rush hour approached. Isaiah kept to his usual routine, checking dumpsters for recyclables, helping an elderly woman navigate around a broken section of sidewalk, staying visible enough to seem harmless, but invisible enough to avoid trouble. His feet ached from walking, but the shelter wouldn't open for hours yet. He rounded the corner onto Mason Street, just as the streetlights began to flicker on. The evening air had turned cool, and Isaiah pulled his jacket tighter, feeling the apple from Mrs. Martinez bump against his ribs. Maybe he'd share it with Harold later, if the older man was still awake. The busy intersection ahead filled with people heading home from work. Isaiah watched them hurry past, each locked in their own world of appointments and obligations. Cars honked impatiently at pedestrians who crossed too slowly. A mother hustled two small children along, their backpacks bouncing as they skipped to keep up with her pace. Isaiah moved steadily toward the corner, his notebook secure in his pocket, his worker's eyes still catching details others missed. The evening stretched before him, ordinary as any other, filled with the familiar rhythm of survival that had become his life. The evening air had grown chilly as Isaiah sat on the concrete curb, carefully unwrapping half a turkey sandwich. Sarah, the kind-hearted cafe worker who sometimes slipped him leftovers, had tucked it into a paper bag with a napkin. Such small dignities meant everything when you lived on the streets. He took small, measured bites, making the meal last. The sandwich tasted fresh, and he found himself wondering if Sarah had made it specially, rather than pulling it from the day-old bin. The thought warmed him more than the food itself. Traffic had thinned as rush hour faded into evening. The construction site across the street loomed dark and quiet now, its machinery silent until morning. Isaiah studied the temporary fencing, noting how the sections didn't quite align properly. Poor installation always bothered him. It was the kind of detail that spoke of rushed work and cutting corners. The purr of a luxury engine drew his attention. A black SUV with tinted windows glided to a stop at the curb near the construction entrance. The vehicle gleamed under the streetlights, its pristine surface a stark contrast to the dusty construction barriers. The rear door opened, and a man stepped out, his polished shoes catching the light. Isaiah recognized him immediately from news coverage and construction site photos. Nathaniel Vale, the developer behind South District's transformation. Vale wore an expensive suit that probably cost more than Isaiah had earned in his best months as a maintenance worker. "I don't care what the contractors say," Vale spoke sharply into his phone, his free hand gesturing in frustration. "The press conference is tomorrow morning, and I need those safety reports signed off tonight." He began walking toward the site entrance, his attention fixed on his conversation. Isaiah's eyes automatically swept the area, an old habit from years of checking buildings for safety issues. The streetlight cast strange shadows across the sidewalk where Vale was heading. Something about those shadows didn't look right. He squinted, focusing on a maintenance pole near the corner. There, a thin wire catching the light, nearly invisible unless you knew to look for it. Isaiah's heart began to beat faster as his mind processed what he was seeing. The wire ran from the pole to a decorative street fixture overhead, one that should have been properly secured, but now seemed to hang at an odd angle. Isaiah stood slowly, his sandwich forgotten. The setup was deliberate. The wire positioned just right to catch someone's legs. The fixture above loose enough to give way with any sudden movement. One good tug would send metal and glass raining down. Vale continued walking, completely unaware, still arguing into his phone. "I'll be there in 20 minutes. Just have the paperwork ready." Time seemed to slow as Isaiah watched the wealthy man's next step align perfectly with the wire's position. Security cameras would be watching. Guards might be nearby. Isaiah knew how this would look. A homeless man rushing at a millionaire in the dark. He'd seen how quickly police appeared when people like him got too close to people like Vale, but he also knew exactly what would happen if that fixture came down. He'd seen too many workplace accidents, too many preventable tragedies that happened because people looked the other way. Vale was 3 steps from the wire now. 2 steps. Isaiah moved. Years of maneuvering through tight maintenance spaces had kept him agile despite his age. He crossed the street in quick, quiet strides, his worn boots making no sound on the pavement. Vale's foot was rising for that final step when Isaiah reached him. In one fluid motion, Isaiah's hand clamped over the businessman's mouth, while his other arm wrapped around Vale's shoulders, pulling him backward. He felt Vale's body go rigid with shock. "Be quiet," Isaiah whispered urgently against Vale's ear. Vale tried to struggle, his phone clattering to the sidewalk. His muffled sounds of protest cut off abruptly as an enormous crash split the evening air. The street fixture plummeted exactly where Vale had been standing moments before, sending shards of glass and twisted metal across the concrete. The impact echoed off the surrounding buildings. Car alarms began wailing. In the distance, a dog started barking. Vale stood frozen in Isaiah's grip, staring at the destruction that had nearly claimed him. Isaiah's mind raced. He needed to let go before security arrived, but he had to make Vale understand this wasn't random. "Look at the wire," he said quickly, releasing his hold. "Someone rigged this. See how it's tied off? That fixture didn't just fall." Vale stumbled forward a step, his face pale in the remaining streetlight. He looked from the wreckage to Isaiah, then back again, his composed business persona completely shattered. "Who?" he started to ask, but the sound of running feet and shouting voices cut him off. Security guards appeared from around the corner, weapons drawn. "Mr. Vale!" one shouted. "Are you all right?" "Don't move, sir." Isaiah raised his hands slowly, knowing what came next. The guards' faces hardened as they spotted him, their guns swinging in his direction. "On your knees," one ordered. "Hands behind your head." The evening air filled with the sound of approaching sirens. More voices joined the chaos: construction night watchmen, passing drivers, people emerging from nearby buildings. Isaiah kept his movements slow and deliberate as he knelt on the concrete, the same concrete where his half-eaten sandwich still lay on the curb across the street. He could feel Vale's eyes on him, could sense the businessman trying to process what had just happened. Around them, the night erupted with flashing lights and urgent voices, but Isaiah remained still, his worker's hands clasped behind his head, waiting for whatever came next. Nathaniel Vale struggled against the iron grip that held him, his heart pounding in his chest. The stranger's hand remained firmly clamped over his mouth, preventing him from calling out. Around them, pedestrians stopped to stare, some pulling out their phones to record what appeared to be an assault on a well-known businessman. "Hey, let him go!" someone shouted from across the street. Isaiah's whispered warning still echoed in Nathaniel's ears. "Be quiet." The words carried such urgent intensity that despite his panic, something made Nathaniel hesitate before fighting back harder. That moment of hesitation saved his life. A deafening crack split the air, followed by the screech of metal against metal. The decorative street fixture, an ornate combination of steel and glass that had hung overhead, came crashing down with devastating force. It struck the exact spot where Nathaniel had been standing seconds before, exploding into a shower of glass and twisted metal. The impact sent shards skittering across the pavement like deadly hail. Bystanders screamed and jumped back, shielding their faces. The sound of shattering glass seemed to go on forever, a cascade of destruction that left everyone frozen in shock. Only then did Isaiah release his hold on Nathaniel, stepping back with his hands raised where everyone could see them. Nathaniel stumbled forward a few steps, staring at the wreckage. His expensive leather shoes crunched on broken glass as he turned to face his unexpected rescuer. "Police! Nobody move!" The shout came from behind them as Nathaniel's security detail finally reached the scene. Two guards rushed forward with weapons drawn, while others formed a protective circle around their employer. "On the ground! Now!" One of the guards roughly grabbed Isaiah's shoulder, forcing him down to his knees. Isaiah complied without resistance, his movements calm and deliberate, even as he was handcuffed. "Wait!" Nathaniel said, finding his voice at last. His words came out shaky. "Wait, he pulled me back. He saved me from—" He gestured at the destruction, still struggling to process what had happened. Red and blue lights began strobing off the surrounding buildings as police cars screamed around the corner. The crowd of onlookers had grown larger, their phones recording everything. Someone had already called 911, reporting an attempted assault on Nathaniel Vale. Isaiah spoke quietly but clearly from his kneeling position. "Sir, look at the base of that maintenance pole." He nodded toward a metal utility pole a few feet away. "You'll see a wire. It's thin, almost invisible unless you're looking for it. Someone rigged that fixture to fall." Nathaniel squinted in the direction Isaiah indicated. At first, he saw nothing. Then a flash from someone's camera caught it. A barely visible wire stretched taut between the pole and where the street fixture had been anchored. The positioning couldn't have been accidental. "Check that wire," Nathaniel ordered his security team. "Don't touch it, but document everything. This wasn't random." Police officers swarmed the scene, pushing back the growing crowd of spectators. An officer approached Nathaniel, notebook in hand. "Mr. Vale, are you all right? We'll need a statement about what happened." Nathaniel nodded distractedly, his eyes still fixed on the wire. His security chief was carefully photographing the setup from multiple angles, his face grim. This was no accident. Someone had wanted that fixture to fall, and they'd known exactly where to place the trigger. "Sir," another officer called out, "what do you want us to do with him?" He gestured to Isaiah, who remained quietly kneeling on the pavement, hands still cuffed behind his back. Nathaniel turned back to his rescuer. "Remove those cuffs immediately. This man just saved my life." His voice had regained its usual authority. He saw something wrong and acted while everyone else was just walking past. The officers exchanged glances but complied, helping Isaiah to his feet. Isaiah rubbed his wrists gently, his expression remaining neutral despite the chaos around him. He seemed almost embarrassed by the attention. "I need to know who you are," Nathaniel said, stepping closer. "What you did. How did you spot that wire? How did you know?" But Isaiah was already backing away, shaking his head slightly. "Just check those maintenance records, sir. That kind of rigging takes time and access. Someone knew what they were doing." "Wait, please," Nathaniel called after him. "At least tell me your name." Isaiah paused for just a moment. "It doesn't matter. Just be more careful where you walk." Then he turned and walked away, his movements unhurried but purposeful. He threaded between the police cars and disappeared down a side street before anyone thought to stop him. Nathaniel watched him go, aware of the reporters already gathering at the perimeter of the police line. Tomorrow's headlines were writing themselves. Millionaire developer Nathaniel Vale narrowly escapes death in suspicious street accident. But the real story was walking away down that darkened street. The police lights continued to flash, painting the scene in alternating red and blue. Glass crunched under shoes as investigators worked. Nathaniel's phone buzzed constantly with concerned messages from board members and business partners who had already heard something was wrong. But Nathaniel barely noticed any of it. He stood there amid the controlled chaos, staring down the empty street where his mysterious rescuer had vanished. For the first time in years, he found himself completely uncertain about what had just happened, and increasingly certain that he needed to find out who that quiet stranger really was. Nathaniel Vale leaned forward in his leather chair, watching the security footage for what felt like the 100th time. The large screen mounted on his office wall showed multiple camera angles of the previous night's incident in crisp detail. Morning sunlight streamed through the floor-to-ceiling windows of his top-floor office, creating a stark contrast with the nighttime scenes playing before them. "Stop there," Nathaniel commanded. The security technician froze the footage. "Go back 30 seconds. Tobias Grant stood near the window, his reflection ghosting against the glass as he observed both the video and his boss's reactions. His perfectly tailored suit and carefully neutral expression gave nothing away. The footage rewound. On screen, Isaiah appeared at the edge of the frame, sitting on the curb with half a sandwich. The timestamp showed 6:47 p.m. They watched as Isaiah's head snapped up, his attention caught by something off-camera. Moments later, Nathaniel's black SUV pulled into view. "Look at his face," Nathaniel said, pointing. "He spots something wrong before I even step out of the car." The investigators, two serious-looking men in dark suits, scribbled notes. On screen, Isaiah stood slowly, his eyes clearly tracking something above street level. The camera angle shifted to show Nathaniel emerging from his vehicle, phone pressed to his ear, completely unaware of the danger. "This is where it gets interesting," Tobias said smoothly. "Watch his approach pattern." They observed as Isaiah moved with surprising speed and purpose, covering the distance to Nathaniel in seconds. The camera caught the exact moment Isaiah grabbed him, the sudden backward motion, the flash of panic on Nathaniel's face, and then the devastating crash of metal and glass. "Freeze it there," one investigator requested. The technician complied. "Mr. Vale, there's no question this was deliberate sabotage. The wire setup required detailed knowledge of the street fixture's attachment points. This wasn't random vandalism." Nathaniel rubbed his temples. "Someone wanted that fixture to fall on me specifically. They knew my schedule, knew I'd be there for the press event." He turned to Tobias, who had access to my itinerary. "I'm already conducting a full audit," Tobias assured him. "But, sir, I feel compelled to raise a concern about this." He gestured to the frozen image of Isaiah. "Good Samaritan." Nathaniel's eyes narrowed. "The man saved my life." "Of course," Tobias said carefully, "and we're all tremendously grateful. But doesn't it strike anyone else as suspicious? A homeless man just happens to spot a nearly invisible wire, has the exact technical knowledge to understand the danger, and then disappears before anyone can question him?" The investigators exchanged glances. One cleared his throat. "Mr. Grant raises valid security concerns. How did he know where to look?" "Because he was paying attention when no one else was," Nathaniel snapped. "While everyone else walked past staring at their phones, he actually saw something wrong and acted. I want him found." "Sir, at least let us vet him first," Tobias suggested. "For your safety. He could be connected to whoever set this up." Nathaniel stood abruptly, his chair rolling backward. "Find out who he is. But remember, He's not a suspect. He's the reason I'm alive to have this conversation. Across town, inside the mission shelter's basement, Isaiah methodically pushed a broom across the worn linoleum floor. The morning news played quietly from an old television mounted in the corner, but he kept his eyes down, focused on his task. Every few minutes, the story about last night's incident would repeat, showing grainy cell phone footage of the aftermath. "Isaiah!" Malik's excited voice echoed down the stairs. "The heater's acting up again in the women's dormitory. Miss Evelyn asked if you could take a look." Isaiah propped his broom against the wall. "Grab my tool bag from the supply closet. I'll show you how to check the pilot light." Malik hurried to comply, his enthusiasm evident. The teenager had been shadowing Isaiah for months, soaking up every bit of maintenance knowledge shared. They headed upstairs together, passing beneath the TV just as a reporter announced, "Police are still searching for the mysterious homeless man who saved prominent developer Nathaniel Vale from what investigators now confirm was a deliberate attempt." Isaiah quickened his pace slightly. In the women's dormitory, he knelt beside the old gas heater, Malik crouching next to him. "Always check the simplest explanation first," Isaiah explained, his voice steady and patient. "Most times, it's something basic." "Like when you fixed my cart yesterday?" Malik asked, handing Isaiah a screwdriver. "Everyone else said it was too broken, but you found that bent wheel bearing right away." Isaiah nodded, demonstrating how to safely access the pilot assembly. "Good memory. Problems hide in plain sight if you're not paying attention to details." They worked together quietly for several minutes, Isaiah explaining each step while Malik watched intently. The teenager's phone buzzed several times with news alerts about last night's incident, but he remained focused on the lesson. The shelter's front door chime sounded distantly. They could hear Evelyn greeting someone, her warm voice carrying through the old building. Then footsteps, multiple sets, approached with purpose. "Mr. Reed," Malik whispered, "those reporters have been calling the shelter all morning asking about you." Isaiah carefully replaced the heater's access panel. "The pilot light's fixed. Remember what I showed you about the gas valve adjustment?" Malik nodded, but his expression was worried. "Are you in trouble?" "No," Isaiah said quietly. "But sometimes helping someone brings more attention than you're ready for." He stood slowly, his knees creaking. "I need you to finish sweeping the basement for me. Can you do that?" "Sure. But what about—" Their conversation was interrupted by voices in the hallway. Two well-dressed women in business attire appeared in the dormitory doorway, tablets in hand. Behind them, Evelyn Price stood with her arms crossed, her expression carefully neutral. "Excuse me," one of the women said, consulting her tablet. "We're looking for Isaiah Reed. Mr. Vale would like to speak with him." Inside the shelter's maintenance room, Isaiah carefully adjusted the screwdriver, tightening a loose door hinge that had been squeaking for days. The familiar motion was soothing. A simple problem with a straightforward solution. Sunlight filtered through the room's small window, dust motes dancing in the beam as he worked. "Isaiah?" Evelyn Price's gentle voice made him pause. He turned to find her standing in the doorway, her practical shoes silent on the worn floor. Her expression was hard to read, somewhere between concern and hope. "There are some people here to see you. Important people." Isaiah wiped his hands on the worn rag from his tool belt. "From the police?" "No," Evelyn shook her head. "They're representatives from Vale Industries. They're waiting outside." She stepped closer, lowering her voice. "They say Mr. Vale wants to meet with you personally." Isaiah's shoulders tensed. He'd spent years learning to be invisible, to fix things quietly and slip away before anyone could make him into something he wasn't. "I don't need recognition, Miss Evelyn. What happened last night? Anyone would have done the same." "But they didn't," she reminded him gently. "You did. And from what I hear, you likely saved that man's life." She gestured to the ancient door hinge he'd been repairing. You've spent years fixing broken things for others. Maybe it's time to let someone help fix things for you. Through the window, Isaiah could see two sleek black cars parked outside the shelter. A small crowd of regular shelter residents had gathered, whispering and pointing. Malik stood among them, practically bouncing with excitement as he talked to one of the well-dressed representatives. "They'll want to put me on TV," Isaiah said quietly. "Turn me into some kind of story." Evelyn touched his arm lightly. "Then tell your own story, Isaiah. You've earned that right." After a long moment, Isaiah carefully placed his screwdriver back in his tool belt. He straightened his worn jacket, wished he had time to wash his hands properly. "Will you come with me, just to hear what they have to say?" "Of course," Evelyn smiled. "Malik too, if you'd like. That boy looks ready to burst if he can't be part of this." They walked together through the shelter's main room, past the morning cleanup crew and the remains of breakfast service. Every eye followed them. Isaiah kept his gaze forward, his back straight, despite his shabby clothes. Dignity, he'd learned, came from how you carried yourself, not what you wore. Outside, the morning sun was bright and cool. Two women in expensive business suits stepped forward, tablets in hand. Behind them, a professional driver stood beside one of the black cars, door ready to open. "Mr. Reed," the taller woman smiled warmly. "I'm Jennifer Matthews, Mr. Vale's executive assistant. He asked us to personally escort you to his office. He wants to thank you properly for your quick thinking last night." "That's not necessary," Isaiah said quietly. "Please," Jennifer insisted. "Mr. Vale was very specific. He said the man who saved his life deserves more than a message delivered by intermediaries." Malik edged closer, practically vibrating with excitement. "Isaiah, that's a Mercedes S-Class, and they said Mr. Vale's office is in the River Tower downtown." Isaiah glanced at the teenager's bright eyes, then at Evelyn's encouraging nod. He thought of all the mornings he'd watched people in suits walk past him like he was invisible. Now here they were, waiting for his answer. "All right," he said finally. "But I can't stay long. I promised to help with lunch service today." Jennifer smiled. "We'll have you back whenever you need, Mr. Reed." The car's interior was cool and quiet, the leather seats softer than any bed Isaiah had slept in for years. He sat stiffly, acutely aware of his worn clothes against the pristine upholstery. The city slid past the tinted windows, familiar streets seen from an unfamiliar perspective. 20 minutes later, they pulled up to the River Tower's gleaming entrance. Isaiah had walked past this building hundreds of times, collecting cans from the perfectly maintained planters. Now, doormen in crisp uniforms held the glass doors open for him. The elevator rode straight to the top floor, smooth and silent. Isaiah's reflection in the polished walls showed a man who looked both less and more than he felt. Tired but straight-backed, weathered but dignified. Vale's office suite occupied the entire floor. Through floor-to-ceiling windows, the city spread out below like a map. Isaiah could see the Mission Shelters neighborhood in the distance, the South District construction zones, all the places he'd walked looking for work or shelter. Nathaniel Vale stood as they entered, moving around his massive desk with quick steps. He was younger than Isaiah expected, dressed in an expertly tailored suit that probably cost more than Isaiah had earned in his best year. "Mr. Reed," Nathaniel extended his hand, "I can't thank you enough for what you did last night. You saved my life." Isaiah shook his hand carefully. "I just saw something wrong and tried to help. Anyone would have done the same." "But they didn't," Nathaniel said, echoing Evelyn's words from earlier. "You did. And from what our security team tells me, you didn't just act. You understood exactly what was wrong. That takes knowledge, experience." He gestured to a comfortable chair. Isaiah sat cautiously, while Nathaniel leaned against his desk. "I had my team look into your background. Nathaniel continued. 20 years in building maintenance, certified in multiple systems, outstanding work records until a workplace injury 4 years ago. He paused. You know more about real buildings than most of my consultants with fancy degrees. Isaiah's hands tightened slightly on the chair's arms. That was a long time ago. It doesn't have to stay in the past. Nathaniel straightened. I have a proposition for you. Our South District renovation project needs someone who understands the old buildings, someone who can spot problems others might miss. I'm offering you temporary housing and a consulting position. Help us do this right. Isaiah looked around the elegant office, at the man offering him a chance he'd stopped believing in years ago. His heart pounded as Nathaniel added softly, You saved my life. Let me give yours a chance to change. Isaiah stood in the lobby of the Sterling Heights apartments, his worn backpack clutched tightly in one hand. The marble floor gleamed beneath his scuffed boots, and a crystal chandelier sparkled overhead. Jennifer Matthews, Nathaniel's assistant, guided him toward a private elevator, her heels clicking precisely against the polished stone. The apartment is on the 8th floor, she explained, sliding a keycard through the reader. Mr. Vale keeps several units for visiting executives and special consultants. Isaiah nodded silently, watching the floor numbers climb. His reflection in the mirrored walls showed every crease and patch in his old clothes. 4 years of homelessness had taught him to be invisible. Now he felt exposed, like a splinter in this polished world. The apartment door opened into a space that made Isaiah's breath catch. Sunlight poured through floor-to-ceiling windows, illuminating an open-concept living area with modern furniture and gleaming surfaces. A full kitchen with stainless steel appliances occupied one corner. Down a short hallway, he glimpsed a bedroom and what looked like an ensuite bathroom. Everything is fully stocked, Jennifer said, placing a keycard and a new phone on the kitchen counter. Toiletries, clean towels, fresh linens. The closet has some basic clothing in what we hope are your sizes, Mr. Vale insisted. She demonstrated the security system, showed him how to operate the climate controls, and explained that he could order meals from the building's restaurant service. Isaiah listened carefully, though his mind struggled to accept that this space, larger than some shelter dormitories, was meant for just him. Take some time to settle in, Jennifer suggested kindly. Mr. Vale would like you to join a property inspection meeting at 2 o'clock. I'll send a car. After she left, Isaiah stood motionless in the center of the room, almost afraid to touch anything. The silence felt thick after years of shelter noise and street sounds. Finally, he set his backpack carefully on a kitchen stool and walked to the bathroom. The sight of the shower, spacious, spotlessly clean, with multiple shower heads and endless hot water, nearly brought tears to his eyes. In the shelter, showers were strictly timed to 5 minutes. On the streets, they were precious luxuries grabbed at public facilities or kind church basements. He stood under the hot spray for what felt like hours, watching years of struggle swirl down the drain. The provided soap smelled of expensive botanicals, so different from the harsh institutional bars he was used to. When he finally stepped out, the mirror showed a different man. Cleaner, yes, but somehow more vulnerable without his protective layer of street grit. The closet held crisp button-down shirts, clean jeans, new underwear, and socks still in their packages. Isaiah ran his fingers over the soft cotton, remembering when such basics weren't precious gifts. He dressed slowly, each fresh item feeling like armor against his uncertainty. At 1:45, the building's front desk called to announce his car. The drive to Vale Industries headquarters was short but surreal. Isaiah watched pedestrians on the sidewalks, wondering if any of them had ever noticed him during his years collecting cans from their corporate trash bins. The property inspection meeting was held in a glass-walled conference room with a view of the South District construction zones. A dozen executives in expensive suits studied blueprints and development plans spread across a massive table. Nathaniel Vale stood at the head, discussing structural assessments of the older buildings. "This is Isaiah Reed," Nathaniel announced as Isaiah entered. "He'll be consulting on the renovation aspects of our project." Several executives exchanged skeptical glances. Isaiah recognized their expressions. He'd seen that same dismissive look countless times on the street. But Nathaniel gestured him toward the blueprints, with genuine respect. "What do you make of the Wilson Building assessment?" Nathaniel asked, indicating a structural report. Isaiah studied the documents carefully. Years of maintaining similar buildings had taught him to read between the lines of official reports. "These support beam ratings seem optimistic," he said quietly. "In buildings this age, you often find hidden rust damage where the steel meets the original masonry, especially near old water lines." A senior engineer frowned. "Our instruments showed acceptable stress tolerances." "Instruments can't always reach the crucial points," Isaiah explained. "You need to check the northeast corner particularly. That's where the original water main entered. In the 1940s, they often used inferior metal alloys for the connection plates. Add 8 decades of seasonal expansion." He continued pointing out potential issues, drawing from decades of hands-on experience. Gradually, the skeptical looks turned thoughtful. When Isaiah described a specific pattern of basement wall deterioration common in buildings of that era, the engineer began taking detailed notes. Nathaniel listened intently, his expression growing more impressed with each observation. "This is exactly the kind of practical knowledge we need," he said finally. "Theory is valuable, but nothing beats years of actual experience with these old structures." The meeting continued for 2 hours. Isaiah found himself drawn into detailed discussions of load-bearing walls, ventilation systems, and the hidden challenges of modernizing historic buildings. For the first time in years, his expertise was being truly valued rather than ignored. As the sun began to set, Isaiah stood on his temporary apartment's balcony, gazing at the city lights emerging in the dusk. The view was beautiful, but it made him acutely aware of how far he was from the street-level world he knew. Below, he could see people hurrying home, some perhaps to shelters or hidden sleeping spots. The new phone buzzed with a message from Jennifer. Tomorrow's schedule, including another inspection meeting. Isaiah's fingers trembled slightly as he read it. The device felt foreign in his hands, like everything else in this strange new reality. The city spread out before him, familiar but different from this height. He could see the mission shelter's cross gleaming in the distance, the South District's construction cranes, all the places that had defined his life these past difficult years. Now he viewed them from up here, through spotless glass, wearing clean clothes that still carried department store creases. The morning sun cast long shadows across the South District's crumbling brick buildings as Isaiah stepped out of Nathaniel's black SUV. Construction equipment hummed in the distance, and workers in hard hats moved purposefully around the fenced perimeter. Tobias Grant stood waiting for them, tablet in hand, his polished shoes somehow spotless despite the dusty ground. "Good morning, Mr. Vale," Tobias said smoothly. "I've prepared a comprehensive demolition schedule for your review." Isaiah studied the old buildings quietly while the executives talked. These weren't just structures to him. They were homes. He remembered fixing radiators and patching roofs here years ago, learning the quirks of each aging system. Behind every boarded window was a story he understood. "What do you see?" Nathaniel asked, noticing Isaiah's intense focus. "Life," Isaiah answered simply. He walked toward a 3-story apartment building marked for demolition. "This foundation is solid. The brick needs repointing, but the walls are sturdy. Those steel beams they used in the 1930s? Better quality than what they sell now." He ran his hand along the weathered brick. Mrs. Martinez used to grow tomatoes on the fire escape here. Her grandson would help me bleed the radiators every fall. Tobias cleared his throat. The renovation costs would far exceed. Not necessarily, Isaiah interrupted quietly. He pointed to specific areas. The main issues are fixable. The roof needs work, yes, but the bones are good. These buildings were built to last, if someone cares enough to maintain them properly. Nathaniel listened intently as Isaiah outlined practical repair solutions. His eyes widened when Isaiah explained how strategic reinforcement could preserve the historic architecture while meeting modern safety codes. The families here don't need luxury apartments, Isaiah continued. They need stable homes they can afford. With smart repairs instead of demolition, you could keep their rents reasonable. The profit margins, Tobias began. Sometimes there's more value in doing right than doing profitable, Isaiah said. The words came from a deep place of knowing what it meant to lose everything. They continued down the block, passing a small medical clinic where several people waited outside. Isaiah's steps slowed as he recognized a familiar figure in purple scrubs. Lena Reed stood frozen in the clinic doorway, staring at her father walking alongside men in expensive suits. Her dark eyes widened in disbelief, then narrowed with concern. "Lena," Isaiah said softly. His heart ached at how beautiful and grown-up she looked, how much like her mother. "Dad?" She glanced uncertainly between him and the executives. "What's going on? Why are you with them?" "Mr. Reed is providing valuable consulting services," Nathaniel explained, extending his hand. "You must be his daughter." Lena ignored the offered handshake. "Consulting? On what?" "Building assessment and renovation planning," Isaiah said. "They're letting me help figure out how to fix things instead of tearing them down. Since when do rich developers care what homeless people think?" The bitterness in her voice made Isaiah wince. "Dad, these people aren't your friends. They don't care about this neighborhood or the people in it." "Lena, please!" "No, I've watched you trust the wrong people before. It always ends the same way." She grabbed his arm, pulling him aside. "Whatever they're promising you, it's not real. Don't let them use you." "I'm trying to make things better," Isaiah said quietly. "For everyone here, including you." "I don't need you to fix anything," Lena snapped, but her voice cracked slightly. "I learned to take care of myself a long time ago." Before Isaiah could respond, she disappeared back into the clinic. The pain of her words felt like a physical weight in his chest. Nathaniel had tactfully stepped away during their exchange, but now he approached carefully. "Family relationships can be complicated," he said. "Give her time." They spent the next few hours examining other buildings. Isaiah pointed out hidden structural features, explained cost-effective repair techniques, and shared insights from years of hands-on maintenance work. His knowledge repeatedly impressed the engineers Nathaniel had brought along. As the sun climbed higher, they paused in the shade of an old sycamore tree. Workers were setting up scaffolding nearby, the metallic clangs echoing off brick walls. "I appreciate your honesty today," Nathaniel said, watching the construction activity. "Most people tell me what they think I want to hear. You tell me what I need to know." "Truth is all I've got left sometimes," Isaiah replied. "Would you be willing to continue advising on this project? Your perspective is invaluable." Isaiah thought about Lena's warning, about all the times life had pulled the rug out from under him. But he also thought about the families in these buildings, people like Mrs. Martinez, who deserved a chance to keep their homes. "Yes," he said finally. "As long as we're really trying to help people, not just profits." Nathaniel nodded solemnly. "You have my word." That evening, Isaiah returned to the corporate apartment as sunset painted the city in shades of gold. The keycard felt more natural in his hand now. The elevator ride less surreal. Inside, he carefully hung up his new jacket. Still strange to have one. and stood by the window. From here, he could see the South District's mix of old and new buildings stretching toward the horizon. Somewhere down there, Lena was probably finishing her shift at the clinic. The distance between them felt both smaller and larger than before, but for the first time in years, he had a chance to build something positive. Not just buildings, but maybe bridges, too. Hope was a fragile thing after so long without it, but Isaiah let himself feel its warmth as the city lights began to twinkle on. The press conference room buzzed with anticipation. Television cameras lined the back wall while reporters filled every seat, their notebooks ready. Isaiah stood quietly in a corner, wearing a new navy suit that still felt stiff and unfamiliar. He watched Nathaniel Vale approach the podium with confident steps. "Good morning," Nathaniel began, his voice carrying clearly through the speakers. "Today, I'm announcing major changes to the South District Redevelopment Project." Large screens behind him displayed architectural renderings, but these were different from the luxury towers originally planned. Instead, they showed renovated historic buildings, community spaces, and mixed-income housing that preserved the neighborhood's character. "After careful consideration and invaluable community input, we're implementing a new vision," Nathaniel continued. 60% of existing buildings will be restored rather than demolished. All current residents will have the right to remain in their homes at controlled rents. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Isaiah noticed several community leaders nodding with approval. Additionally, we're establishing the South District Workshop, a job training facility focusing on building maintenance, electrical work, and construction skills. This program will provide career paths for local residents and ensure these historic buildings receive proper care for generations to come. Nathaniel gestured toward Isaiah. "These changes were inspired largely by someone who showed me what I was missing. A few weeks ago, Isaiah Reed saved my life when he noticed sabotaged equipment that could have killed me. But he did more than that. He opened my eyes to the true value of this neighborhood." Isaiah felt uncomfortable as cameras turned toward him. He wasn't used to being seen, let alone celebrated. Mr. Reed spent years maintaining buildings in South District. His expertise revealed not just structural issues we'd overlooked, but the human impact of our original plans. He helped me understand that real development isn't about replacing communities, it's about strengthening them. Evelyn Price, sitting in the front row, smiled warmly at Isaiah. Beside her, Malik beamed with pride for his mentor. The questions began. Reporters wanted details about funding, timelines, and logistics. Nathaniel handled each query with practiced ease, occasionally deferring technical questions to his development team. Isaiah noticed Tobias Grant standing off to the side, his expression carefully neutral. A local reporter raised her hand. "Mr. Reed, how does it feel to go from being homeless to helping reshape such a major project?" Isaiah stepped forward reluctantly. "This isn't about me," he said quietly. "It's about doing what's right for families who need stable homes, about teaching young people valuable skills so they can build better lives. That matters more than any personal change in fortune." His simple sincerity earned appreciative nods from several community leaders. Even the cynical reporters seemed moved. After the press conference, people crowded around to shake hands and offer congratulations. Church leaders praised the job training initiative. Housing advocates expressed relief about the rent protections. Local contractors eagerly discussed partnership opportunities. "You did well," Nathaniel said, when the crowd finally thinned. "Would you mind stopping by my office before you leave? There's something else we need to discuss." An hour later, Isaiah sat across from Nathaniel's desk, wondering what more could possibly happen today. The morning's announcements already felt surreal. "Isaiah, you've done more than just help with this project," Nathaniel began. "You've reminded me of principles my mother tried to teach me about wealth and responsibility, about seeing people, not just profits." He pulled out a folder. "That's why I want to do something meaningful to help you rebuild your life." He slid a set of photographs across the desk. They showed a modest two-story house with white siding and a small front porch. It needed some work: peeling paint, loose shutters, overgrown yard, but the structure looked solid. "It's about 15 minutes from South District," Nathaniel explained. "Close enough to be convenient for work, but in a quiet residential area. 3 bedrooms, decent-sized kitchen, full basement you could use as a workshop." He paused. "I bought it yesterday." "It's yours, if you want it." Isaiah stared at the photos, his hands trembling slightly. "I don't understand." "This isn't charity," Nathaniel said firmly. "It's investment in someone who's proven their character and capability. The deed will be in your name. No strings attached. Just a chance to build the life you deserve." Isaiah picked up a photo, showing the backyard with its old maple tree. He could almost see Malik learning repair skills in a basement workshop, or Lena bringing his grandchild to visit someday. Simple dreams he'd stopped letting himself imagine years ago. "I can't accept," he started. "Yes, you can," Nathaniel interrupted gently. "Sometimes good things happen because good people deserve them. Accept it as recognition of who you are, not charity for what you lack." He held out a ring with 2 keys attached. "The renovation crew can start whenever you're ready. Make it your own." Isaiah reached for the keys with unsteady fingers. Their weight felt both terrifying and wonderful in his palm, a door opening to possibilities he'd thought were lost forever. "Thank you," he whispered, his voice rough with emotion. "I don't know what else to say." "You don't need to say anything. Just use this opportunity to keep helping others the way you always have." That evening, Isaiah sat alone in his temporary apartment, still holding those keys. Streetlights gleamed on their brass surface as he turned them over and over. They represented more than just a house. They meant stability, dignity, a foundation to rebuild relationships and dreams. He thought about the press conference, about Nathaniel's announcement, about all the changes happening so fast. For the first time in years, he felt truly hopeful about the future. Not just his own, but the future of an entire neighborhood he'd never stopped caring about. The keys caught the light again as he set them carefully on the nightstand. Tomorrow would bring more meetings, more plans, more steps toward this new life. But for now, he simply let himself believe that sometimes miracles really did happen, not just in grand gestures, but in small brass keys that opened doors to second chances. Isaiah woke early, ready to begin another day of project planning. He made his bed with military precision. Old habits died hard, even in a luxury apartment. The morning sun painted warm stripes across the carpet as he prepared a cup of coffee. A simple pleasure he still couldn't take for granted. His phone buzzed. A text from Malik. "Turn on the news." Isaiah found the remote and switched on the wall-mounted television. His coffee cup froze halfway to his lips as he read the scrolling headline, "South District Heroes Past Raises Questions. Documents Show Safety Violations." The morning anchor's voice filled the room. Breaking news about Isaiah Reed, the homeless man who recently saved millionaire developer Nathaniel Vale. Records show Reed signed off on maintenance reports at the Marshall Building in 2018, just months before a structural failure that injured a tenant. Isaiah sank into the leather armchair, his legs suddenly weak. He remembered that day with painful clarity. The warnings he'd filed about needed repairs. The supervisors who'd dismissed his concerns, the paperwork they'd pressured him to sign, promising follow-up work, would be done. His phone started ringing. Messages flooded in. He turned it off, unable to face questions he knew were coming. On screen, reporters interviewed experts who questioned how someone with such a history could be trusted to advise on building safety. Social media screenshots showed people calling him a fraud. suggesting he'd orchestrated the entire rescue to gain position. A knock at his door made him jump. It was Sandra, Nathaniel's assistant, her usually warm smile replaced by professional distance. "Mr. Vale needs to see you immediately." The elevator ride to the executive floor felt endless. Through glass walls, Isaiah noticed people quickly averting their eyes as he passed. Yesterday's hero had become today's liability. Nathaniel's office held several unfamiliar faces. Board members and lawyers, Isaiah guessed. Tobias Grant stood near the window, his expression concerned, but something else lurking beneath it. "Isaiah," Nathaniel began, his voice carefully controlled. "We need to discuss these allegations." "They're not allegations," Isaiah said quietly. "I did sign that report. But there's more to the story." "Then help us understand," Nathaniel replied, but his tone had changed from yesterday's warmth to cautious professionalism. Isaiah explained about the maintenance requests he'd submitted, the budget cuts that delayed repairs, the pressure to sign off on incomplete work. "I tried to warn them. When the ceiling finally collapsed, they buried my original reports and blamed the documentation I'd been forced to sign." "That's a serious accusation," one of the lawyers noted. "Do you have proof?" "I kept copies, but they were in my apartment when I was evicted." Everything was lost. The words tasted bitter. How many times had he lost the chance to prove his truth? Tobias stepped forward, his voice smooth with apparent concern. "Nathaniel, I've been looking deeper into this. There are other irregularities in Mr. Reed's work history. Missing documentation, gaps in employment. Given the sensitive nature of our project and the public scrutiny we're under." Isaiah watched Nathaniel's face, seeing the doubt creep in. The same doubt he'd seen in his daughter's eyes years ago, in former colleagues who'd turned away, in everyone who found it easier to believe the worst. "The board feels," Nathaniel said carefully, "that we need to pause your involvement while we review these matters, for everyone's protection." "You mean for the company's protection," Isaiah corrected softly. "This isn't personal," Nathaniel insisted. "We just need time to investigate properly. The housing arrangement and stipend will continue for now. But please understand, we have investors, partners, community trust to consider." Isaiah stood slowly. "Yesterday you said this wasn't charity, that it was recognition of character. What changed?" "Nothing changed. We just need to be thorough." "Everything changed," Isaiah interrupted, "because now it's hard. Now it costs something to believe in me." He turned toward the door, then paused. "You know what's strange? When I pulled you away from that sabotaged equipment, I never wondered if believing in danger would hurt my reputation. I just knew what was right." The silence that followed felt heavy with unspoken words. Nathaniel shifted uncomfortably in his chair while board members exchanged glances. Only Tobias remained perfectly still, watching. "We're not asking you to leave the apartment," Nathaniel said finally. "Just step back from public involvement until I'm safe again? Until the story changes? Until you decide if I'm worth the risk?" Isaiah shook his head. "I've lived that waiting game before. I won't do it again." He walked out slowly, back straight, eyes forward. The same dignity he'd maintained through every other loss and disappointment carried him through the stares and whispers. In the apartment, he packed his few belongings into the old backpack he'd kept in the closet. Some habits came from wisdom. Always be ready to leave when the world changes its mind about you. He placed the house keys on the kitchen counter. Strange how light they felt now, when yesterday they'd seemed heavy with promise. Next to them, he left the new wallet containing the advance payment card Nathaniel had given him. He wouldn't take anything that could be called theft or ingratitude later. The security guard in the lobby watched him walk out, probably already alerted to deny future entry. Isaiah didn't look back. The morning sun felt colder now, the street harder under his feet. He walked until the gleaming towers gave way to familiar, struggling neighborhoods. The mission shelter appeared ahead, its brick walls weathered but standing strong. Through the window, he could see Malik helping serve breakfast. Evelyn would be in her office, sorting through donation paperwork and worried about the failing boiler. Isaiah squared his shoulders and climbed the worn steps. There was dignity in honest work, in helping where you could, in being the same person whether people praised or doubted you. He had lived that truth on the streets. He would live it now. The shelter door creaked open, welcoming him back to a world he understood. The evening sun cast long shadows through the corporate apartment's windows as Isaiah methodically folded his few possessions. Each item represented a brief moment of hope. The new shirt he'd worn to meetings, a notebook filled with building repair suggestions, a maintenance manual Nathaniel had given him to review. His old backpack waited on the bed, a reminder that some things never really changed. The luxury apartment felt different now. Yesterday, it had seemed like a stepping stone to a new life. Tonight, its polished surfaces and expensive furnishings only emphasized how far he'd fallen. Again. Isaiah moved slowly through the rooms, making sure everything was exactly as he'd found it. The military crisp bed corners, spotless bathroom, organized kitchen. No one could say he hadn't shown respect for what he'd been given. His mama had taught him that dignity wasn't about what you had, but how you carried yourself when you lost it. The house keys felt heavy in his palm. He turned them over, remembering how his hands had trembled when Nathaniel first presented them. Such a small thing to hold such big dreams. Fixing up his own place, having Lena and her kids visit, teaching Malik basic maintenance skills in a proper workshop. Now those dreams seemed foolish, like clothes that had never really fit. He placed the keys on the kitchen counter beside the wallet containing his advance payment card. The money would have helped, but keeping it felt wrong. Better to leave clean, owing nothing, proving nothing except his own integrity. At the door, he hesitated. Part of him wanted to write a note explaining everything. The truth about those old maintenance reports, the warnings he'd tried to give, the supervisors who'd buried his documentation. But what good were words without proof? He'd learned long ago that the world believed what it wanted to believe about men like him. The elevator ride down felt longer than usual. Security guards watched him cross the lobby, their faces carefully neutral. Just yesterday, they'd greeted him by name. The automatic doors whispered shut behind him with quiet finality. Outside, the evening traffic rushed past, indifferent. Isaiah adjusted his backpack and began walking. Each step carried him further from the gleaming corporate towers and closer to familiar struggling neighborhoods. The weight of the day pressed down on his shoulders, but he kept his head high. Let people see whatever they wanted to see. A homeless man, a fraud, a failure. He knew who he was. The mission shelter's worn brick facade appeared ahead, its windows glowing warm against the deepening dusk. Through the glass, he could see people lining up for dinner. The sight brought an unexpected lump to his throat. Here, at least, was honest need and honest help. Malik spotted him first, nearly dropping the stack of plates he was carrying. "Mr. Reed! You're back!" The teenager's genuine welcome made Isaiah's chest ache. Evelyn emerged from her office, reading his expression with years of practice. "I saw the news," she said quietly. "Come in and sit down. Dinner's almost ready." "I don't want to make trouble for the shelter," Isaiah began, but Evelyn cut him off with a gentle firmness he remembered from harder days. "This shelter exists for people who need a safe place," she said. "That's what it's always been, and that's what it still is. Now come help Malik with those plates before he breaks them all trying to wave at you." In the familiar routine of setting up dinner service, Isaiah felt some of his tension ease. He worked alongside Malik, showing him how to stack trays efficiently, listening to the boys chatter about school and his dreams of becoming an electrician. Later, in Evelyn's cluttered office, Isaiah finally let the whole story spill out. He described the dangerous repairs he'd documented years ago at the Marshall Building, the budget cuts that kept getting approved, the mounting pressure from supervisors to sign off on incomplete work. "I filed report after report," he said, staring at his weathered hands, "documented every crack, every leak, every violation. But after the collapse, all anyone could find was that final paperwork with my signature. Everything else disappeared." And who was going to believe the word of a maintenance man against company records? Evelyn listened without interrupting, her face compassionate but not pitying. When he finished, she simply asked, "What do you want to do now?" "Nothing," Isaiah replied wearily. "Fighting just makes it worse. Rich folks' lawyers against my word? We know how that ends." He managed a small smile. "Besides, the shelter's old boiler still needs fixing. That's something I can actually do some good with." "You're a better person than most," Evelyn observed. "Not many would choose helping others after being treated this way." Isaiah shook his head. "Not better. Just know what matters. Can't fix how people see me, but I can fix what needs fixing." Always could. That night, lying on the narrow shelter cot, Isaiah listened to the familiar sounds of the basement sleeping room: quiet breathing, occasional coughs, the creak of ancient pipes. The corporate apartment's expensive mattress seemed like something from another life now. The miracle had slipped away like morning mist, leaving him back where he started. He touched the small notebook in his pocket, its pages still filled with repair ideas and careful drawings. Tomorrow there would be work to do, people to help, small ways to maintain dignity in a world that made it hard. It wasn't the future he'd briefly glimpsed, but it was real. It was enough. The shelter's old boiler hummed its uneven rhythm below, reminding him of repairs yet to be made. Isaiah closed his eyes, letting exhaustion wash over him. Sometimes the hardest fix was accepting what couldn't be fixed at all. A bitter wind howled outside the mission shelter's windows as Isaiah helped serve breakfast to residents seeking refuge from the approaching cold front. The weather report warned of record-low temperatures, concerning Evelyn, who paced near the old radiators with worry etched on her face. "They're barely putting out any heat," she said, touching the metal surface. "The forecast says we could hit 15 degrees tonight. We've got 38 people sleeping here." Isaiah set down the serving spoon and walked over to check the radiator himself. The metal felt cooler than it should, especially given how hard the ancient boiler was working in the basement. He could hear its labored chugging even from upstairs. "Let me take a look," he said. "Might be able to get more heat flowing before things get worse." Malik, who was wiping down tables nearby, perked up. "Can I help, Mr. Reed?" "I want to learn about heating systems." Isaiah nodded, grateful for the teenager's eagerness. Together, they descended into the basement's maze of pipes and ducts. The boiler room felt like an old battlefield, with its hissing valves and creaking metal. The massive unit that heated the building dominated the space, its dull green paint peeling from decades of use. "First thing in checking any system," Isaiah explained to Malik, "is understanding how it's supposed to work. See these pipes here? They carry hot water up through the building. If they're not getting enough pressure, or if there's air trapped inside, the heat won't flow right." They spent the morning tracing lines, checking connections, and making adjustments. Isaiah showed Malik how to bleed radiators and identify different valve types. The teenager proved a quick study, asking smart questions and taking notes in a small pocket notebook that reminded Isaiah of his own. "This one's completely stuck," Malik called out, struggling with a corroded valve near the water tank. Isaiah came over to help. "Sometimes old parts just give up, but usually there's a way to coax them back to life if you're patient enough." He demonstrated a gentle rocking motion with the wrench, slowly working the valve free without breaking it. By early afternoon, they'd managed to improve the heat flow significantly, though Isaiah knew these were temporary fixes. The shelter needed major updates it couldn't afford. Still, the immediate crisis was handled. "We should document what we fixed," Isaiah said. "Makes it easier for the next person who has to work on it. There should be maintenance records somewhere." "I think I saw some old files in the storage room," Malik offered. "Want me to check?" The storage room was really just a converted coal bin, its shelves stuffed with decades of paperwork and donated supplies. Malik disappeared inside while Isaiah finished tightening a loose connection. "Mr. Reed!" Malik's voice carried excitement. "Come look at this!" Isaiah found him sitting cross-legged on the floor, surrounded by dusty folders. The teenager held up a thick manila envelope. "These are building inspection reports from all over the city. Look at the contractor name, Sterling Development Services. Isn't that the company they said you worked for?" Isaiah took the envelope with suddenly unsteady hands. Inside were maintenance records, invoices, and inspection certificates dating back years. His eyes caught familiar addresses. The Marshall Building where he'd worked, other properties in South District, even some current Vale development projects. "Hand me that box, too," he said, pointing to a carton marked Property Records 2015-2018. They spread the documents across the concrete floor. Isaiah's maintenance experience helped him spot patterns others might miss. The same contractor names appeared repeatedly. Work orders showed identical repair costs for different buildings. Inspection dates overlapped in impossible ways. "Something's not right here," he muttered, arranging papers in chronological order. A familiar logo caught his eye. The Sterling Development Services header he remembered from his old reports. But these documents showed the company operating under slightly different names over the years. Sterling Maintenance, LLC, Sterling Property Services, SD Management Group. "Look at these signatures," Isaiah said, pointing to a series of inspection certificates. "Same handwriting, different names. They were hiding under new companies, but it's all connected." Malik leaned in closer. "What does that mean?" Isaiah's mind raced as pieces fell into place. The fraudulent repairs he'd reported years ago weren't isolated incidents. They were part of a system. Run-down buildings, fake maintenance records, unsafe conditions leading to accidents that forced sales or demolition. He found recent invoices showing Sterling's newest iteration working as a subcontractor on Vale development projects, with Tobias Grant's signature on the approval lines. "They're still doing it," Isaiah said quietly. "Same scheme, different buildings. Only now they're working with bigger companies." He remembered the sabotaged street fixture that nearly killed Nathaniel. And maybe dealing with anyone who might expose them. Malik's eyes widened. "So, when they blamed you for that building collapse, they needed someone to take the fall," Isaiah finished. "Easier to blame the maintenance man than admit to years of fraud." He stared at the scattered evidence of corruption that had cost him everything. But they got sloppy. Left a paper trail they thought no one would ever find. "What are you going to do?" Malik asked. Isaiah carefully began gathering the most important documents, his hands steady despite the weight of what they'd discovered. Years of maintained dignity in the face of injustice had taught him to act with purpose, not anger. The shelter's old boiler chugged below them, working harder against the dropping temperature outside. Like that struggling machine, Isaiah knew systems could only take so much strain before something had to give. Isaiah spread the documents across a folding table in the shelter's quiet kitchen area. Evelyn had given him space to work, while keeping curious residents away. The afternoon light streamed through dusty windows as he methodically arranged years of paperwork into clear patterns. His weathered fingers traced company letterheads and signatures, connecting dates and locations like pieces of a complex puzzle. The more he studied, the clearer the deception became. Tobias Grant's name appeared repeatedly, authorizing inspection reports that masked serious safety violations. "Lord have mercy," Isaiah muttered, comparing two nearly identical maintenance forms from different years. The same contractor's signature appeared on both, one from his old building that collapsed, another from the recent street fixture incident. Only the dates and company names had changed. He pulled out his small notebook and began writing down the connections. Sterling Development Services had morphed through several names over the years, but the pattern stayed consistent. Submit false repair records, ignore actual maintenance needs, wait for inevitable problems, then profit from the resulting property transfers. The afternoon grew colder as Isaiah worked, but he barely noticed. His mind was focused on untangling years of deliberate negligence. He found inspection certificates for buildings he knew personally, structures that should have been condemned but were mysteriously cleared for occupancy. Each document carried Tobias Grant's authorizing signature. "Need some coffee?" Evelyn appeared beside him, setting down a steaming cup. Isaiah nodded gratefully. "Thanks. Been trying to make sense of all this." She glanced at the scattered papers. "Finding what you were looking for?" "More than I expected." He showed her two documents side by side. "See these signatures? Same person signed off on repairs that never happened. One from my old building, one from that street fixture that almost killed Mr. Vale." Evelyn leaned closer, squinting through her reading glasses. "And that Tobias Grant approved both? Along with dozens more just like them." Isaiah sipped the coffee, its warmth a contrast to the chill settling in his chest. "He's been running this scheme for years. Properties get neglected. Accidents happen. Then developers swoop in to buy them cheap. But why try to hurt Mr. Vale? Isn't he Grant's boss?" Isaiah shuffled through more recent papers. "Vale Development is expanding fast. Lots of new projects, bigger contracts. But Mr. Vale started asking questions about building safety, wanting better inspections. He tapped a series of memos showing rejected maintenance proposals. Tobias needed him out of the way. "So the street accident wasn't random," Evelyn said quietly. "No, ma'am. And when I spotted the sabotage, Tobias needed me discredited fast." Isaiah's voice held no bitterness, just calm certainty. "Easier to paint me as incompetent than let anyone look too close at those old records." The shelter's heater groaned in the background, still struggling against the winter cold. Isaiah thought about all the other buildings in similar condition, all the people at risk from hidden dangers. His own lost years seemed small compared to the scope of what he'd uncovered. Malik poked his head into the kitchen. "Mr. Reed? Channel 4 is running another story about you and Mr. Vale. They're saying the company might cancel the whole South District project." Isaiah walked to the small TV mounted in the corner. The news showed Tobias Grant speaking at a press conference, looking appropriately concerned as he discussed reviewing all development plans in light of recent revelations. "He's using the scandal to take control," Isaiah said. "Once Mr. Vale steps back, Tobias can run things his way. No more community programs, no saved buildings, just quick profits." Evelyn touched his arm gently. "What are you going to do?" Isaiah gathered the documents carefully, organizing them into clear chronological order. His hands were steady despite the weight of his decision. He'd lost everything once by trying to report similar problems. Speaking up again could bring even worse humiliation. But he remembered Nathaniel's face the night of the near accident, the shock of realizing how close he'd come to disaster. Isaiah couldn't stay quiet, knowing others faced similar dangers. "Sometimes doing right isn't about what it costs you," he said, echoing wisdom his wife had once shared. "It's about what it costs others, if you don't." He placed the papers in a clean manila envelope and wrote, "Maintenance Records, Sterling Development Services," in neat block letters across the front. Years of careful observation and attention to detail had finally revealed the truth. Now it was time to make sure the right people saw it. "I need to take these to Mr. Vale directly," he told Evelyn. "No lawyers, no press, no committees. Just show him the evidence and let him decide what's right." "Want me to call you a cab?" she offered. Isaiah shook his head. "Think I'll walk. Helps me clear my mind." He pulled on his worn coat and tucked the envelope securely inside. "Besides, I know these streets. Been watching them a long time." The late afternoon sun cast long shadows as Isaiah prepared to leave the shelter's warmth. Malik held the door, concern evident on his young face. "Be careful, Mr. Reed." Isaiah managed a small smile. "Always am, son. Always am." He stepped out into the cold, the precious documents protected against his chest, and began walking toward Vale Development's gleaming office tower. Morning sunlight streamed through the floor-to-ceiling windows of Vale Development's main conference room, reflecting off polished wood and chrome. Nathaniel Vale stood at the head of the long table, his tablet displaying charts and renderings as he addressed 24 board members and executives. "Despite recent setbacks, our South District projections remain strong," he said, though his usual confidence felt hollow. "We've adjusted timelines to account for additional safety reviews." The double doors swung open. Every head turned as Isaiah Reed walked in, still wearing his worn work coat, but standing straight and dignified. A security guard hurried after him. "I'm sorry, Mr. Vale," the guard said. He insisted on, "It's all right." Nathaniel raised his hand, studying Isaiah's calm expression. Something in the older man's bearing made him pause. Let him speak. Tobias Grant shifted in his chair, his polished appearance suddenly tense. "This is highly irregular. We're in the middle of a confidential meeting." Isaiah approached the table slowly, pulling a manila envelope from inside his coat. "Apologize for interrupting, but some things can't wait. These documents need your attention, Mr. Vale." Board members exchanged uncomfortable glances. A few began gathering their papers to leave, but Nathaniel's quiet authority kept them seated. "What documents?" he asked. Isaiah opened the envelope with careful movements, spreading maintenance records and inspection certificates across the gleaming table. Property reports going back 8 years, all connected to Sterling Development Services under different names, all showing the same pattern of fraud. "This is absurd," Tobias stood up sharply. "You can't just barge in here with random paperwork and make accusations." "Not random," Isaiah said. His voice remained steady as he arranged the papers in clear rows. "These are official records from city buildings your company managed, including the one I worked in before it collapsed." Nathaniel picked up the nearest document, studying the familiar letterhead and signatures. His expression darkened as he compared dates and details. "The same contractor's signatures appear here," Isaiah continued, pointing to specific lines. "And here. And here again. Buildings declared safe that weren't. Repairs logged but never completed. Money paid for work that didn't happen." An older board member leaned forward, adjusting her glasses. "These inspection certificates, they all have the same authorization codes." "Because they're all falsified," Isaiah said. "Part of a system to hide problems until properties could be bought cheap after accidents happened." He met Tobias's glare without flinching. "The same system that almost killed Mr. Vale last week." The conference room grew very quiet. Nathaniel spread more documents across the table, his movements deliberate, as understanding dawned. "The street fixture sabotage," he said slowly. "You're saying it wasn't random." Isaiah shook his head. "No, sir. Same contractor signature on those inspection forms as these old ones. Same person who signed off on my building's fake repairs years ago." "This is outrageous," Tobias snapped, but his voice had lost its usual smoothness. "You can't possibly expect anyone to believe the wild theories of a—" "Of a what?" Nathaniel cut in sharply. A man who spent 20 years maintaining buildings? Who noticed details we all missed? Who saved my life while you were pushing to reduce safety inspections? He held up two documents side by side. These signatures match, Tobias. The payment patterns match. The timing of accidents matches property acquisitions you recommended. Tobias's face had gone pale. I can explain. The wire that nearly killed me matches techniques documented in these older incidents, Nathaniel continued. His voice grew colder with each word. All approved under your authority. All profiting the same hidden accounts. Board members were now studying the evidence with intense focus. Several pulled out phones, quietly making calls. Isaiah stood silently, letting the truth speak through years of carefully preserved papers. Mr. Vale, a board member said gravely, these payment records show serious financial misconduct. We need to contact authorities immediately. Tobias suddenly shoved back from the table, knocking his chair over. This is a setup. You can't trust him. He's just a homeless nobody trying to exploit. He's the man who saved my life, Nathaniel said quietly, while you were apparently trying to end it. He pressed a button on his desk phone. Security to the main conference room, please. Isaiah watched as two guards appeared in the doorway. He felt no satisfaction seeing Tobias's panic, only relief that the truth was finally clear. These documents will need to be secured as evidence, a board member said, carefully gathering the papers. Mr. Grant, I suggest you remain here until police arrive. Tobias looked wildly around the room, seeing only hard faces and dawning comprehension. His carefully constructed facade crumbled as security officers moved toward him. You don't understand, he tried one last time. I was protecting our interests. No, Nathaniel said firmly. You were protecting yourself, at the cost of people's homes, their safety, their lives. He turned to Isaiah with genuine respect. Thank you for bringing this to us directly. We have a lot of damage to repair. The security officers now stood on either side of Tobias, who seemed to shrink into himself as the weight of exposure settled over him. His years of manipulation and fraud lay exposed on the polished conference table, documented in careful detail by the very people he had tried to silence. Isaiah thought of all the families displaced by Tobias's schemes, all the buildings neglected until they became dangerous. He thought of his own lost years following the accident that Tobias had helped cover up. But mostly, he thought of Malik's faith in learning honest work, and Evelyn's quiet dedication to helping others rebuild their lives. The morning sun continued streaming through the windows, illuminating dust motes that danced in the silent air as security prepared to escort Tobias from the room. Isaiah's careful attention to detail, his years of quiet observation, had finally brought truth into the light. Within minutes of Nathaniel's call, police investigators filled the conference room, their presence transforming the corporate space into an active crime scene. Detective markers appeared beside key documents while photographers captured the evidence layout. Tobias Grant stood against the wall, flanked by officers as his company badge and phone were collected. Everything's here, the lead investigator said, carefully examining the maintenance records. Years of falsified inspections, fraudulent payments, safety violations. This connects directly to last week's sabotage attempt. Isaiah watched quietly from a corner chair while Nathaniel spoke with authorities. The morning's bright sunlight had softened to a gentle afternoon glow, casting long shadows across the polished floor. Board members huddled in small groups, their whispered conversations filling the air with a tense murmur. Tobias suddenly lunged toward the conference room's side door, shoving past a distracted security guard. His polished shoes squeaked against marble as he sprinted down the hallway. Two officers immediately gave chase, while others secured the exits. "Stop him!" someone shouted. The sounds of pursuit echoed through the corporate corridors. Isaiah remained seated, oddly calm. He had seen enough desperate men to recognize when pride finally shattered. Within moments, a crash and shouts from the stairwell confirmed Tobias hadn't made it far. Officers led him back in handcuffs, his expensive suit now disheveled, his careful composure completely gone. The man who had orchestrated so much destruction now looked small and afraid. Add resisting arrest, the lead investigator noted dryly, not looking up from his evidence photos. Nathaniel stood at the conference table, his shoulders tense as he watched his former chief operating officer being processed for arrest. The weight of betrayal showed clearly on his face. He turned to address the board members still present. "I owe all of you an apology," he said, his voice carrying genuine remorse. "I let myself be manipulated. I ignored warning signs. Worse, I failed to trust the one person who consistently showed real character." He walked over to where Isaiah sat. "When you saved my life, I offered help, but withdrew it the moment things got difficult. I should have remembered that a man's true nature shows in his actions, not his position. You proved that twice now." Isaiah shifted in his chair, uncomfortable with the attention, but maintaining his quiet dignity. "Was just doing what needed doing," he said simply. "No," Nathaniel shook his head. "You risked everything to expose the truth, even after we treated you poorly. That takes real courage." The board chair stepped forward, a distinguished woman with silver hair. "Mr. Reed, we owe you an apology as well. Your insights about the South District project were correct. We'd like to formally reinstate your advisory role, with full authority to implement the community protection measures you recommended." Nathaniel nodded. "The training center, affordable housing requirements, local hiring programs, everything we discussed. But this time, you'll help lead it, not just advise." Isaiah looked around the room, seeing genuine respect in the faces that had once dismissed him. "Community needs more than just new buildings," he said carefully. "Needs hope, real chances for people to rebuild." "Exactly," Nathaniel agreed, "which is why I'm offering you more than just your advisory position back." He pulled a familiar set of keys from his pocket. The house keys Isaiah had returned days earlier. "This still belongs to you? Not as charity, but as recognition of your character and abilities." The board chair added, "We're also creating a new position, Director of Community Development and Training. Full salary, benefits, and authority to shape programs that help others transition from hardship to stability. The position is yours, if you'll accept." Isaiah sat very still, feeling the weight of the moment. Through the windows, he could see the South District's old brick buildings catching the afternoon light. He thought of Malik's eagerness to learn repairs, of Evelyn's tireless work at the shelter, of his daughter Lena's cautious hope when he told her about teaching others. "People need someone who understands their struggles," Nathaniel said quietly. "Someone who sees their potential, not their circumstances. You've always done that, even when you had nothing yourself." Isaiah slowly stood, his work-worn hands steady as he accepted the keys. "Not about me having a house," he said. "About making sure others have a chance at one too." Nathaniel smiled. "That's exactly why you're the right person for this." As the investigators continued documenting evidence and officers prepared to transport Tobias, Isaiah looked down at the keys in his palm. They represented more than just a home now. They were a chance to help others find their way back from the edges where he had walked so long. "When do we start?" he asked simply. "The board has already approved emergency funding to begin immediately," the chair replied. "Your first priority will be establishing the job training center and reviewing all existing properties for safety issues Tobias may have hidden." Nathaniel gestured to the scattered maintenance records. "These expose the corruption, but they also show how many buildings and lives need rebuilding. That work starts now." Isaiah nodded, his quiet determination filling the elegant conference room. The same careful attention that had spotted a saboteur's wire would now help restore hope to people society had overlooked. Not through charity, but through opportunity and respect. "Better get to it then," he said, pocketing the keys. "Got a lot of fixing to do." The afternoon sun continued streaming through the windows, illuminating dust motes that danced in the air as investigators gathered the last evidence of Tobias's crimes. But Isaiah's thoughts were already turning to the work ahead, to broken heating systems and leaking roofs, to young people needing skills and second chances, to a community waiting to rebuild. The autumn sunlight streamed through the tall windows of the restored South District workshop, illuminating decades-old brick walls that now gleamed with fresh mortar and purpose. Where broken windows and pigeons had once claimed space, rows of pristine workbenches lined the floor, their surfaces dotted with tools and training materials. The scent of fresh paint mingled with coffee and sawdust. Isaiah Reed stood near the workshop entrance, straightening his navy work jacket with the Director of Training patch. His weathered hands, once empty on street corners, now held a clipboard listing 20 new apprentices starting their journey toward skilled certification. "Everything's ready, Mr. Reed," Malik called from across the floor. The teenager who had once swept shelter floors now moved with the confidence of a certified technician, his own uniform crisp and professional. He finished arranging the last of the training manuals, each one thick with possibility. The workshop buzzed with activity as community members filed in for the opening ceremony. Local business owners chatted with former shelter residents who had completed preliminary training. Church groups that had once offered only meals now discussed job placement partnerships. Evelyn Price from the Mission Shelter beamed as she examined the newly installed heating system, a far cry from the temperamental boiler Isaiah used to nurse through winter nights. "Who would have thought," she said softly, "that fixing that old heater would lead to all this?" Isaiah noticed Nathaniel Vale slip quietly through a side door, choosing to stand at the back rather than command attention. The Millionaire developer had changed too, his usual power suits replaced by a simple button-down shirt and slacks. He caught Isaiah's eye and offered a small nod of recognition. The ceremony podium stood ready, but Isaiah delayed the formal start as he watched the door. His heart quickened when he finally saw Lena enter, her nursing scrubs exchanged for a pretty blouse. She paused just inside, taking in the transformed space. Their eyes met across the workshop floor. For a moment, Isaiah saw echoes of all the pain and disappointment that had separated them. The missed promises, the cold nights, the trust broken by circumstance. But then Lena smiled, really smiled, and crossed the room toward him. "The place looks amazing, Dad," she said, her voice warm with pride. "Those old buildings you used to talk about fixing, you're actually doing it now." Isaiah swallowed hard. "Got a lot of good people helping," he managed. "No," Lena shook her head. "You did this. You stayed who you really were, even when everything was against you. That's what made this possible." She stepped forward and wrapped her arms around him, not a cautious hug of obligation, but the fierce embrace of a daughter who had finally gotten her father back. Isaiah held her close, his eyes misting as he remembered countless nights staring at her photo in his worn notebook. The ceremony itself was brief, but meaningful. Isaiah spoke about second chances and the dignity of work. Nathaniel announced additional funding for expanded training programs. But the real power lay in the faces of the attendees. People who had once been invisible to the city now stood tall as students, teachers, and skilled professionals. Malik demonstrated the workshop's new electrical training station, his enthusiasm drawing chuckles as he excitedly explained every feature. "Mr. Reed taught me it's not just about fixing things," he told the crowd. "It's about fixing them right, so they last for the people who need them. After the formal program ended, guests mingled over coffee and refreshments. Isaiah watched as Lena chatted easily with his apprentices, sharing stories about the porch steps he had repaired just as he'd promised in his notebook. The sound of her laughter felt like healing. Nathaniel approached quietly, hands in his pockets. "You've created something remarkable here," he said. "We all did," Isaiah corrected gently. "Had to learn to trust each other first, though." "You taught me that," Nathaniel admitted, "when you came back with those maintenance records even after we'd pushed you away. Real character shows in actions, not circumstances." They stood in comfortable silence, watching the workshop buzz with activity. Former shelter residents consulted training schedules, while local contractors discussed apprenticeship opportunities. Hope filled the air as tangibly as the sawdust. As the crowd began to thin, a man appeared hesitantly in the doorway. His clothes were worn but clean, his posture uncertain but dignified. Isaiah recognized the look immediately. The same careful pride he had carried during his own hardest days. The man glanced around the workshop, clutching a folded newspaper clipping about the training program. His hands trembled slightly as he approached the nearest desk. "I was wondering," he began quietly, "if you might be hiring?" Several staff members looked up, unsure how to respond. But Isaiah was already moving forward, coffee pot in hand. He filled a clean mug and offered it to the man with a warm smile that held no judgment, only understanding. "Let's start with what you know how to fix," Isaiah said, pulling up a chair. The man's shoulders relaxed slightly as he wrapped his fingers around the warm cup. Isaiah saw his own past reflected in the man's cautious hope. The long nights, the lost connections, the hunger for another chance. But he also saw the future this workshop promised. Dignity restored through meaningful work. Community rebuilt through shared purpose. Lives transformed through simple kindness. The afternoon light slanted through the tall windows, catching dust motes that danced above the workbenches. The scent of coffee and sawdust filled the air as Isaiah began to ask gentle questions about the man's experience with tools and repairs. I hope you enjoyed that story. Please like the video and subscribe so that you do not miss out on the next one. In the meantime, I have hand-picked 2 stories for you that I think you will enjoy. Have a great day.